People still thought they understood Ahmad Mustafayev long before the first bell rang in Istanbul. They saw the muscles, the thick frame, the compact power build, and assumed the story was simple: another strong man chasing a paycheck. But this moment had nothing to do with salary, contracts, or a padded debut. This was about reality, about stepping into the unforgiving truth of professional boxing against someone who already spoke the language fluently. On July 2, 2025, at IBA.PRO 7 in Istanbul, Mustafayev walked toward the ring not as a prospect being guided carefully, but as a man being tested immediately. Across from him stood Madiyar Saydrakhimov, a fighter shaped by systems, medals, and repetition at the highest amateur levels. Bronze at the World Championships, gold at the World Military Games, silver at the Asian Championships. Saydrakhimov wasn't learning on the job. He was executing a formula he trusted. As the venue gleamed near the Golden Horn under perfect weather and an immaculate setup, this fight quietly became something more than an opener. It was a philosophical clash. One man believed pressure and persistence could rewrite outcomes. The other believed distance, timing, and composure always prevail. From the introductions alone, the contrast was striking. Saydrakhimov towered at 190 cm, lean and measured, wearing the calm expression of someone who had been here many times before. Mustafayev, shorter at 176 cm but carrying 85.3 kilograms of dense muscle, stood coiled with nervous energy, stepping into professional boxing for the very first time against a man who had gone 10 rounds with world-class opposition. The gold corner carried belief. The black corner carried certainty. And as the referee brought them together in the center, this wasn't just a fight being sanctioned. It was a lesson about to unfold, written in punches, patience, and pain. From the opening seconds, Saydrakhimov established exactly why experience matters. He didn't rush. He didn't posture. He took the center of the ring and extended his jab like a measuring stick, testing reactions, controlling space. Mustafayev responded the only way he knew how: forward pressure, heavy feet, big intentions. But intention without structure is a dangerous thing in boxing. The reach difference was immediately apparent, and Saydrakhimov exploited it with precision. Sharp lead left landed clean, snapping Mustafayev's head back and disrupting his balance. Then came the right hand, placed perfectly as Mustafayev attempted to close distance with his hands rather than his feet. The ropes caught Mustafayev as his legs betrayed him, and the referee had no choice but to count. It wasn't a flash knockdown. It was a warning shot fired directly into the reality of professional boxing. The debutant was hurt. His knees buckled, his posture stiffened, and for a brief moment the fight looked like it could end before it ever found rhythm. Saydrakhimov didn't pounce recklessly. That was the difference. Years of high-level boxing had taught him restraint. He kept his composure, picked his shots, and forced Mustafayev to survive rather than fight. Mustafayev, to his credit, held on. He absorbed punishment and tried to reassert himself with wide hooks and sheer strength, but every forward step was being taxed. Saydrakhimov's right hand continued to thread the needle, chopping through the guard and finding its way home. The bell ended the round, and Mustafayev was grateful for it. He had survived, but he hadn't competed. The scorecards reflected dominance, but more importantly, the psychological balance of the fight had already tilted. One man knew exactly where he was. The other had just learned how dangerous this place could be. Round 2 brought adjustment, but not reinvention. Mustafayev tightened his guard and moved with slightly more caution, but his core approach remained the same. He wanted to impose strength, to back Saydrakhimov up, to turn this into a physical struggle rather than a technical one. Saydrakhimov welcomed that desire because it fit perfectly into his plan. Each time Mustafayev stepped forward, he left openings, small ones, but enough for a fighter with good timing to exploit. Saydrakhimov continued to work behind the jab, occasionally stabbing to the body, slowly draining energy and confidence. Mustafayev landed his best punch of the fight so far, a sharp left hook that briefly reminded everyone that power changes conversations. But Saydrakhimov answered immediately, snapping back with an uppercut that narrowly missed but sent a clear message. This was not a man willing to be bullied. The referee briefly intervened over shots straying toward the back of the head, but the momentum never shifted. Saydrakhimov remained composed, circling just enough, never overcommitting, always ready to counter. Mustafayev's aggression was admirable, but it was beginning to look predictable. He gambled that something heavy would land eventually. Saydrakhimov bet that patience would outlast desperation. As the round closed, it was clearer than ever that Mustafayev was fighting uphill, not just physically, but mentally. He was trying to win moments. Saydrakhimov was winning minutes. By the third round, the fight had settled into a pattern that favored the man in black. Saydrakhimov controlled distance with subtle footwork, dipping his knees and lining up the right hand whenever Mustafayev overreached. The debutant's mouth began to hang open slightly, a sign that the pace and tension were starting to tax him. Muscle, while intimidating early, demands oxygen, and Saydrakhimov understood this better than most. He stayed busy without wasting motion, peppering Mustafayev with shots that didn't always look devastating but accumulated damage relentlessly. Mustafayev's guard absorbed some of it, but not all. A clean right hand pushed the nose upward, and soon blood followed. It wasn't just cosmetic, it affected breathing, vision, and morale. Still, Mustafayev refused to back down. He waded forward, absorbing punishment with grim determination, occasionally firing back with looping right hands that forced Saydrakhimov to stay alert. There were moments, brief ones, where Saydrakhimov switched off and Mustafayev capitalized enough to remind him that heavyweights only need one opening. That reality kept the fight honest. Yet over the round, control never truly slipped. Saydrakhimov banked another frame, steadily extending his lead. The story was no longer about whether Mustafayev could win rounds. It was about whether he could change the fight. Entering the fourth round, the corners told different stories. Saydrakhimov's team urged focus and patience. Mustafayev's corner pleaded for anything that could turn the tide. The Azerbaijani fighter showed heart, pressing forward despite fatigue, blood, and mounting damage. He threw combinations with bad intentions, hopping to force exchanges. But Saydrakhimov remained disciplined, answering body shots with straight punches upstairs, never allowing Mustafayev to set his feet comfortably. The contrast in boxing IQ became more pronounced here. Saydrakhimov varied levels, changed rhythm, and kept Mustafayev guessing just enough to prevent sustained offense. Still, Mustafayev's resilience was undeniable. Each time it looked like he might wilt, he summoned another surge, another charge forward. Pride carried him when strategy could not. The crowd felt it. This was no longer a mismatch. It was a test of how far heart could go against structure. As the round ended, Saydrakhimov remained firmly in control, but something subtle was shifting. The longer Mustafayev stayed upright, the more dangerous he became, not technically, but emotionally. Hope was building, and in heavyweight boxing, hope is never harmless. Round 5 changed everything in an instant. Saydrakhimov, perhaps feeling too comfortable, allowed himself to linger in range. It was a small lapse, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, but catastrophic at this level. Mustafayev saw it and acted on instinct rather than thought. A short right hand looped over the top, landing clean and sending Saydrakhimov to the canvas. The arena erupted. For the first time all night, control vanished. This wasn't skill overriding strategy, it was chaos disrupting order. Saydrakhimov rose quickly, visibly frustrated with himself, knowing exactly what had happened. He had switched off and Mustafayev punished him for it. The knockdown didn't erase 4 rounds of dominance, but it injected doubt and energy where there had been none. Mustafayev surged forward, fueled by belief, throwing everything he had left. Saydrakhimov responded wisely, stepping back, re-establishing distance, and refusing to trade unnecessarily. The remainder of the round belonged to Mustafayev on the scorecards, but the psychological victory was even bigger. He had proven that persistence mattered, that he belonged here, that this fight wasn't over simply because logic said it should be. The 6th and final round opened with urgency. Mustafayev knew the situation. He needed something dramatic. There was no room for patience, only risk. He launched himself forward, throwing wide right hands from every angle, willing to sacrifice balance for impact. Saydrakhimov, now fully alert, returned to fundamentals. He boxed long, picked shots carefully, and resisted the urge to sit in the pocket. Still, pride crept in. At moments, Saydrakhimov chose to trade, eager to finish strong and assert dominance. That decision flirted with danger. Mustafayev clipped him again, enough to keep the fight honest, enough to remind everyone that unpredictability is a weapon. Sweat flew, blood stained the canvas, and fatigue pulled at both men. But the gap in efficiency became clear once more. Saydrakhimov's punches landed straighter, cleaner, and with less wasted motion. Mustafayev's power remained threatening, but exhaustion dulled its edge. As the final minute ticked away, the outcome was no longer in doubt, but the respect certainly was. When the final bell rang, both men stood exhausted, marked, and tested. Saydrakhimov had done enough, far more than enough, to secure victory. He had controlled most of the fight, survived danger, and reasserted his superiority after a costly mistake. But Mustafayev's performance told a deeper story. This was his professional debut, against a level of opposition most fighters would never face early, and he had refused to fold. He had been hurt, bloodied, outboxed, and still found a way to drop a highly decorated opponent. That matters. Boxing rewards wins, but it remembers courage. As the decision was announced, unanimous for Saydrakhimov, there was no controversy, only acknowledgement. The better boxer had won, but the tougher night belonged to both. Saydrakhimov's victory reinforced what his resume already suggested. He thrives away from home. He remains calm under pressure. He learns in real time. From Havana to Istanbul, he had proven he could adapt, survive, and execute across environments. This fight fit seamlessly into his narrative, a disciplined professional transitioning smoothly from elite amateur success. For Mustafayev, the loss carried lessons rather than shame. Power alone is not enough. Pressure must be educated. Distance must be respected, but heart is irreplaceable. The 5th round knockdown would live on as evidence that he belongs, that with refinement and experience, his story could still unfold in meaningful ways. In the end, this fight delivered exactly what boxing is supposed to deliver: truth. Not the highlight reel kind, but the uncomfortable, revealing kind. It showed how systems dismantle chaos, and how chaos can still strike back. It showed what boxing IQ matters and why courage keeps fighters standing when logic says they shouldn't be. On a night filled with legends at ringside and history in the air, two heavyweights gave everything they had, one left with his hand raised. The other left with something just as valuable, proof that he could endure. And in boxing, endurance is often the first step toward evolution.